Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are getting into something really special. It's a deep dive into what you might call technological time travel.
That's the perfect way to phrase it, actually.
Yeah.
We're looking at a pedal that's brand new, basically, the BiASS RE2 Space Echo.
Yeah.
But its soul, its entire reason for being, comes from a 50-year-old machine.
The legendary Roland RE201.
Exactly.
And when BiASS dropped the RE2 in 2022, they were pulling off what seems like an engineering magic trick.
It's a huge mission.
A colossal one. To take this massive, delicate, famously temperamental tape echo machine from 1974 and shrink it faithfully into one of their little pocket-sized pedals. This is so much more than just making another delay pedal.
Oh, completely. The challenge isn't just making a digital delay. I mean, that technology is, it's been around forever. It's mature. The real challenge is replication. The RE201 is famous for being imperfect.
Non-linear, right.
Exactly. You're talking about the friction of the actual tape, the heat from the preamp, the little instabilities in the motor speed, and crucially, the physical spacing of its 3 playback heads. To replicate all that complex physical stuff digitally in a tiny box.
Yeah, that's got to take some serious processing power.
It demands the absolute pinnacle of what we call DSP, digital signal processing. It's pure modeling.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the sources and figure out how exactly BiOSS pulled this off. We want to go past the marketing points and really get into the how. How does this little pedal capture the real physical behavior of tape?
And how does it get those multi-head rhythms so right? The ones that are so iconic.
And maybe the biggest question of all, how does it recreate that famous gradual sonic thing that everyone calls the bloom?
We're digging into the architecture. Every little decision they made, from the algorithms they chose to how they mapped the knobs, it all had to serve one goal. If the RE2 doesn't feel and sound like a living, breathing, slightly moody tape machine from 1974, then the whole project is a failure.
Right. And we want to know what they built into this design that lets it do more than just be a standard sterile digital delay.
Exactly.
And, here's the core takeaway for you, the listener, right up front. Understanding this pedal means understanding that complex, beautiful analog sound. It's truly democratized now.
That's so true.
This is the most affordable, the most compact, and definitely the most reliable Space Echo experience that has ever been released.
You're taking away all the barriers. The $1,000 repair bills, hunting down fragile tape loops, the sheer size of the original units.
All of that is gone. This isn't just a convenience. It's a real technological achievement. It's the legend, just in a modern, usable format.
Yeah.
So let's start with the source, the legend itself. The Roland RE201 Space Echo. When that thing came out in 1974, what made it so special? Why did it become an icon?
Well, it was really a revolution in reliability, first and foremost, but combined with a sound that was just totally unique. Before the RE201, tape echoes they were notorious maintenance nightmares.
Right, you hear the horror stories.
Oh, yeah. They often use these clumsy spool-to-spool systems. So the tape was always getting tangled. It was a pain to load. The absolute genius of the 201 was its self-contained, continuously rotating tape loop. It was in its own little cartridge.
That cartridge design, that was the game changer then.
It was everything. It gave it so much more stability and, frankly, longevity than anything else in the market.
Yeah.
It meant the tape was always at the right tension, the right speed. It reduced failures and the need for constant tweaking dramatically.
Which means you could actually take it on the road.
Precisely. It made it usable on stage, in smaller studios. Other units were basically delicate studio installations. This thing was built to be used. And that, right there, secured its place in touring rigs everywhere.
But, reliability gets you in the door. The sound is what makes you a legend.
Absolutely. And the sound of the RE201 came from this powerful combination of 3 key things, all in one box.
Okay, what were they?
First, the multi-head delays. That's the rhythmic heart. Second, that really characteristic analog preamp. And third, the built-in spring reverb.
All 3 together.
Yeah. That combination created this complete 3-dimensional vintage soundscape. It was rhythmic, it was warm, and it was atmospheric all at once. No other echo machine could really touch it.
So let's bring it back to the modern tribute, the RE2. It's interesting where it sits in the BiOSS lineup.
It is. It's part of their standard compact series. Yeah. You can tell by the model number, the size. It's a classic BOS pedal.
And it's not a Wazacraft pedal.
No, and that's a really subtle but important point. The Waza line is their premium, slightly bigger, more expensive stuff. By putting this in the standard line, BiOSS was basically saying, we are so confident in our DSP that we can nail the full complexity of the Space Echo in our standard, affordable format. It's power for the people.
And when we describe the RE2 as a tape echo, multi-head delay, and spring reverb emulation, that almost sounds too simple. The sources make it clear they were modeling the entire machine, not just the sounds.
That's the leap, you see. It's the difference between emulation and deep simulation. Emulating a delay time is easy. Simulating the physics of a magnetic tape hitting a record head, then a playback head passing through an analog circuit. That's a whole different level.
So let's break down those specific elements, the RE2 models. This is like the anatomy of that vintage tone.
For sure.
Let's start with the rhythmic core, the multi-head tape delays.
Okay, so the original RE201 had one record head and then 3 separate playback heads. Let's call them H1, H2, and H3. And they were spaced at fixed physical distances from each other. You couldn't move them.
And that physical distance is what creates the timing.
Exactly. The distance from the record head to head 1 gives you your shortest delay time. Every other head's timing was just a fixed, unchangeable fraction of that distance. The RE2 captures those exact immutable intervals, and that fixed relationship is what creates those amazing, layered, syncopated rhythms. They sound so organic because they're musically related.
Okay, so once the signal hits the simulated tape, it has to get that RE201 sonic DNA, right?
Yes, and that signature warmth comes from 2 things working together. The tape itself, and just as important, the preamp coloration.
The preamp.
The analog preamp in the original 201 used these specific transistors that gave the signal this subtle, rich, low-mid harmonic thing, and it would gently roll off the high end. And this happened even when the echo was off.
Oh, wow. So it was an always-on kind of effect.
In a way, yes. And the RE2 models that specific coloration. If your simulated preamp is too clean, the repeats just sound separate from your original signal.
Yeah.
By modeling that circuit, the warmth is fused right into your core tone.
And then as the signal keeps looping around, you get into that beautiful imperfection, the gentle tape compression, and of course, wow, and flutter.
Right. Tape compression is so vital, it stops things from getting harsh. As the signal cycles and feeds back, especially when you crank the intensity knob, the simulated magnetic particles get saturated.
So it's like a soft compressor.
It's a very soft, nonlinear compression. It rounds off the sharp edges instead of just letting them clip digitally. So your tone gets denser and thicker, not just louder and more brittle.
And wow and flutter. I mean, that's the sound of life, isn't it? The sound of a machine actually working.
It is the sound of instability in the best possible way.
Wow.
Is the slower cyclical change in the motor speed. It gives you this gentle, long pitch bend, kind of like a subtle chorus or vibrato.
And
flutter is the faster, kind of choppier, higher frequency variation. And simulating this is absolutely essential.
Yeah.
So why vintage tape doesn't sound sterile?
It's proof of the mechanics.
Exactly. And RE2 gives you a dedicated knob for it, so you can creatively use that imperfection. Modern ambient and lo-fi producers, they love that.
And we can't forget the other part of the atmosphere, that classic, short, metallic spring reverb from the RE201.
Yeah, and that specific reverb is fundamental to the Space Echo name.
Yeah.
It is not designed to sound clean or pretty or ethereal.
Vibey.
It's super vibey. It's short, it's bright, it's metallic, it's splashy, and its high-frequency sizzle is a beautiful contrast to the dark, warm tape repeats. Modeling that specific character adds the final layer of vintage atmosphere.
So when you put all of that together, the fixed head rhythms, the preamp color, the soft compression, the modulation, that splashy reverb, they all add up to that one iconic behavior, the repeats that slowly bloom instead of just fading away.
The bloom is the signature. It's the thing, especially when you push the feedback. Most digital delays, if you crank the feedback, they either clip hard or they just run away into this horrible digital screech.
Right.
But the RE2, by modeling all that tape saturation and compression in the feedback loop, causes the repeats to gain harmonic complexity and volume gradually.
So they're feeding back into the warm preamp over and over.
Over and over. They get richer, they get denser. It's like a wave cresting. They bloom before they go into this full, very musical self-oscillation.
Okay, so let's get into the architecture. This is the part that really fascinates me. We know what it sounds like, but how did BOSS manage to distill this giant, complex analog machine into a standard little pedal? Let's talk about the engine room, the DSP modeling.
Well, the sheer amount of computing power needed here it's pretty staggering. This isn't just taking samples of the old machine. The sources are clear on this. It's using high-powered DSP to do a real-time simulation of complex, nonlinear physics.
So you're talking about modeling things like how the magnetism of the tape actually behaves.
Exactly. Things like magnetic hysteresis, which is the lag in magnetic response that causes saturation. You're simulating the friction and the drag of the tape motor in real time.
And they're not just modeling it as one big effect, right? They have to run separate algorithms for the different parts of the machine at the same time.
That's absolutely right. The simulation is component-based. So you've got three key things happening in parallel. First, the multi-head delay logic, which has to calculate the timing based on that simulated tape speed. Second, the really detailed spring reverb modeling.
Which has its own physics.
Totally. It's calculating the weird resonant frequencies of that specific tank. And third, the analog preamp coloration, which has to be applied at every single stage of the signal path. And all of those have to interact realistically, just like they did in 1974.
And this detailed algorithm, it wasn't built just for the RE2, was it? It has a lineage.
That's right. The core algorithms come directly from their flagship pedal, the BISS RE202.
The bigger dual foot switch one?
Yep. The RE2 uses that same foundational high-fidelity modeling, but it's been optimized and streamlined to fit into the smaller single-foot switch compact format.
So you're getting the same sonic quality as the Big Brother, just with a slightly more focused feature set.
Exactly. The core sound is identical.
Okay, so let's look at the interface. The control surface, the knobs, they're how we, the user, interact with all that simulated physics.
The controls are literally the instruction manual for the simulation. So let's take the repeat rate knob. On a normal digital delay, when you turn that, you're just adjusting a time parameter, milliseconds.
Simple enough.
But on the RE2, when you adjust the repeat rate, you're simulating a change in the tape motor speed.
So it's a physical simulation, and that has dual consequences, which is so key to the sound.
Precisely. So if you turn the repeat rate knob down really fast, which is like speeding up the motor, two things happen at once. The delay time gets shorter, and the pitch of the repeats you're hearing momentarily goes up.
Because the tape is running faster across the heads.
Exactly. And the opposite happens when you slow it down. The pitch drops and the time gets longer. That pitch shifting artifact when you mess with the rate knob is pure analog tape physics. It's a crucial part of the texture.
Okay, next up, intensity. This is your feedback control, but it's more than just counting repeats.
Intensity tells the simulation how much of the delayed signal to send back into that modeled preamp and compression stage to go around again. And the course is very clear that it's designed for self-oscillation.
This is the Bloom control.
This is the Bloom control. This is what lets you push the simulated tape into that nonlinear saturation and create that dense, rich feedback wash.
The echo knob is pretty straightforward, your mix level, but the tone knob is really interesting. It's a tilt EQ that only affects the repeats.
And that specificity is so important for the authentic sound. It lets you shape how the repeats decay, just like how real tape loses high frequencies with each pass. It's not a master EQ for the whole sound.
So you can make the repeats get darker and darker as they fade.
Perfectly. You can set the tone knob low for that super dark, warm decay. It's a classic dub texture where the echo has to kind of melt into the background. Or you can set it higher, and the repeats stay clear for longer, more rhythmic stuff. Mimics the sound of fresh tape.
And the final dedicated knob, the one that really dials in the imperfection. Wow, and flutter.
This is maybe the most important control on the whole pedal for texture. It directly controls the amount of simulated motor speed and consistency. We can talk about how to use it later, but what it does fundamentally is decide how much musical chaos you want to inject into the timing and pitch of your repeats.
So it can go from just a little bit of movement to full-on psychedelic weirdness.
That's the spectrum, yeah.
Now let's get to the heart of the machine. The multi-head engine and that mode selector knob. This is where the famous rhythmic complexity comes from.
Right, so like we said, the original had one record head and three playback heads, H1, H2, H3, and they were physically bolted in place, so their timing relationship never changed.
They were mathematically related.
They were. If you call the shortest delay time the distance to H1t, then the distance to H2 was about 1.5t, and to H3 was roughly 2t. So you get these natural dotted eighth and quarter note relationships built right in.
So the 11 modes on the pedal are just different ways of combining those three fixed delays?
Exactly that. The mode selector just lets you turn on or off any combination of those three playback heads. The RE2 replicates those 11 possible combinations exactly, and that's where the magic is.
Give me a couple of examples of those combinations.
Okay, so you could select a single head mode, like just H1, for a simple slapback echo. Or you could select H1 and H3 at the same time.
So you get a short repeat and a long repeat together.
Right. You get this quick, complex, two-note rhythmic phrase. Or you can turn on all three, H1, H2, and H3, and you get this deeply layered, cascading, syncopated texture. That's a classic post-rock sound. And importantly, some of the modes are just echo, and others combine the echo with the reverb, so it's all integrated.
The fact that they stick to those 11 modes instead of offering, 99 random options is what forces you into the sound palettes that define genres like dub or krautrock.
It connects you, the modern musician, to the exact constraints that forced the innovation that created those musical eras. It's a commitment to the history of the sound.
Okay, let's just take a moment to appreciate the modern touches, BOSS included, because even though it's modeling a 1974 machine, the RE2 has some critical modern features.
Stereo outputs are a must-have in 2024, no question. Whether you're running a wet-dry rig or you just want those echoes to spread out in a mix, stereo is non-negotiable for modern work.
And I love how they included tap tempo without adding another foot switch.
That's just smart engineering, isn't it? The single foot switch does two jobs. You hold it to bypass the pedal, or you tap it twice quickly to set the tempo.
So you keep the small footprint, but you get that essential live feature.
Exactly. And you also get buffered bypass, which is standard for BISS. It keeps your signal strong and clear even when the pedal's off, which is vital if you have a big pedal board with long cables.
And there's that one hidden feature, the internal direct switch, the kill dry option. Why is that so important for advanced users?
Okay, so if you're a pro using a big switching system, or you're in a studio running effects in parallel on a mixing desk, you usually want to separate your dry signal from your wet signal.
You mix them together later.
Right. In that situation, you only want the effects loop to have the delay, the wet signal. If the pedal also sends your original dry guitar sound, you get phase problems and this weird weak mix. The direct switch lets you turn off the dry signal inside the pedal, making the RE2 a perfect pro-level studio insert effect. It shows they were thinking about high-end recording, not just guitarists.
All right, let's shift to the actual tonal experience. We've taken apart the architecture, but what does all that tech actually translate to sonically? What is the real difference between the tape echo sound from the RE2 and a standard, clean digital delay?
It's really the difference between sterile perfection and warm organic imperfection. The main characteristic is a lack of sharpness. The repeats are warm, they're rounded, and they have this gentle but very noticeable roll-off of the high frequencies as they decay. A clean digital delay just repeats perfectly until it vanishes. The RE2 models the degradation of the signal.
I love that concept from the source material that the transients get smeared. It's such a physical way to describe a sound.
It's the perfect description, isn't it? And it comes from the physics of the magnetic medium. When a really sharp transient sound like a clean pick attack hits the simulated tape, the magnetic properties can't capture that attack perfectly and instantly.
It softens that initial edge.
It does. And since that happens every single time the sound passes the record head in the feedback loop, the whole texture of the repiece just gets smoother and more organic. It softens everything in a really musical way.
And that musical softening gets amplified by the saturation and the tape compression, especially as you turn up the intensity.
Oh yeah. When you push the signal level, the RE2 replicates that nonlinear distortion of analog tape. So instead of clipping, where the sound wave just gets brutally chopped off, tape saturation gently limits the peaks and compresses the signal. And that soft limiting is what lets the repeats get so dense and rich without ever sounding brittle or harsh. The sound gets muscular, not damaged.
Let's talk about that other essential sound source, the spring reverb. It can be a bit polarizing for people who aren't used to the space echo sound.
It's polarizing because it's authentic. The RE2 is modeling a specific spring tank from the 70s. It's meant to be short, metallic, super resonant, and vibey. I have to stress this. If you're looking for a giant, clean, cathedral-like modern reverb, this is not it. This reverb is designed to be a little gritty, a bit splashy. You can hear that sproing sound when you hit it hard.
So it serves a very specific aesthetic and function.
Exactly. A modern, clean reverb would sound completely out of place next to those dark, warm tape repeats. The metallic splash of this spring reverb actually cuts through the mix at a different frequency, giving you instant vintage atmosphere without clouding up the rhythmic delays.
It puts the space in space echo.
It really does.
Okay, let's go back to the wow and flutter control. This is the user's main tool for manipulating the texture and adding that intentional chaos. How do the settings translate into different musical sounds?
You can think of it as a spectrum, from just a little bit of gentle warmth all the way to complete sonic disintegration.
Okay.
So if you set it low, say around 9 o'clock, the wow and flutter gives you this really subtle tape warble, just a little bit of movement. It's almost imperceptible. This is perfect for sweetening up classic rock or blues, where you just want the repeat to feel slightly alive, a bit organic, not enough to be distracting.
But then as you start to crank it past noon,
That's where things get experimental. At high settings, you get these dramatic, deep, cyclical wobbles and detuning. The repeats become unstable, dark, really modulated. This is the signature sound of lo-fi production, of psychedelic rock, of ambient drone music. You're intentionally using that detune to make the soundscape feel like it's melting or a bit seasick. It's a delicious bit of sonic grit.
and that instability brings us back to that relationship between intensity and self-oscillation. We should really drill down on that unique blooming thing that happens when you push the feedback.
This is maybe the most important distinction between this and a standard digital delay. The RE2 lets you play the feedback loop. When you turn the intensity up, the sound doesn't just instantly peak and screech. Instead, the signal goes through that simulated tape compression over and over again. And with each cycle, it adds saturation and harmonic density before the volume really takes off.
That gradual nonlinear buildup is the whole essence of the space echo.
It is. It lets you control the swell with incredible precision. You can nudge the intensity up a little bit, create this ambient texture in the background that gets warmer and denser over a few seconds, and then just pull it back before it fully oscillates. It basically turns the pedal into its own evolving instrument. You're not just delaying your guitar anymore. The pedal is feeding its own rich texture back into the mix. It's essential for making those dense sound art loops and atmospheric drones. And, if we zoom out and look at the historical context, the RE201 wasn't just another popular effect. It was genuinely foundational. Its sound is stamped all over specific eras of music.
Yeah, when you look at the list of artists in the sources, Pink Floyd, U2, Radiohead, Brian Eno, Johnny Marr, Tame Impala, you see this clear thread. It's artists who are obsessed with space, atmosphere, and complex rhythm.
That's the common link. For an ambient pioneer like Brian Eno, the space echo was a texture generator. He'd use the long repeats and crank the flutter to make these washed-out cinematic soundscapes. But for someone like the Edge from U2, it was all about those fixed, mathematically related head spacings. He used the specific rhythmic combinations of H1, H2, and H3 to build his signature syncopated delay patterns. The delay became a secondary rhythmic instrument interlocking with the drums.
And it wasn't just specific artists. The machine literally provided the sonic backbone for entire genres that are built on atmosphere and density.
Oh, absolutely. Think about dub and reggae. The whole production style is based on pushing a delay into that creamy, saturated feedback and then using the spring reverb for those sudden metallic splashes of space.
Shoegaze, too.
Shoegaze relied on the RE201's ability to smear the transients and layer up these warm repeats into a cohesive wall of sound. And trip-hop, lo-fi, even today, producers use that analog warmth and intentional instability, the wow and flutter, to give their digital tracks an organic retro feel. The RE2 is a direct pipeline to all of those sonic blueprints.
So if you, the listener, get an RE2, how do you really maximize it in a modern setup? How do you move beyond just standard guitar delay?
Its versatility is its greatest strength. Yes, it's brilliant for those U2-style rhythmic patterns or post-rock textures, but it's also a superb recording tool for pretty much any source. And the key is that modeled preamp.
Okay, so how does that preamp help something that isn't a guitar, like a digital synth?
Well, digital synths, especially older software synths or sterile hardware, can often sound a bit too sharp. Maybe they lack a bit of low-end warmth. If you run them through the RE2's modeled preamp and into the tape simulation, you instantly get that beautiful, subtle compression and harmonic softening. It just takes the digital edge off and gives the synth this vintage, huge presence. Sounds like it was recorded on expensive analog gear.
And I can imagine the uses for vocals and rhythm tracks are enormous.
Huge. For vocals, in a genre like trip-hop or ambient, using long repeats with high flutter settings can create these warped, spectral, almost eerie textures. It pushes the voice back into the mix, making it part of the atmosphere. And for drum machines, if you run a simple, clean beat through the multi-head engine, it turns it into this complex, bouncing, syncopated loop. It gives the rhythm this immediate, organic groove that you just don't get from a perfectly quantized digital loop.
Even for something like bass guitar.
Absolutely. That nonlinear saturation is fantastic on bass. It adds warmth and grit and harmonics without losing the low-end definition, which a lot of aggressive distortion pedals do. It helps the bass sit in a dense mix beautifully.
Okay, let's wrap the section up with some practical considerations for anyone looking to get an RE2. What are the undeniable pros, and what are the trade-offs you have to accept for this compact design? Let's start with the pros.
The pros are all about fidelity and practicality. You get an incredibly faithful model of the RE201. It's quiet, it's reliable, and it's in a tiny footprint. The interface is simple, but it's deeply versatile. And you get the whole vintage package, the built-in spring reverb, stereo outs, tap tempo on the foot switch, and that very pro kill-dry option. It is, without a doubt, the cheapest and easiest way to get the authentic Space Echo sound.
It really is a modern solution that gets rid of all the vintage headaches, but, no design is perfect, especially when you're shrinking something down. What are the key limitations?
The first one is a result of its simplicity. No presets. The bigger RE202 lets you store and recall your settings. On the compact RE2, you have to dial everything in by hand.
So if you need to switch between very different sounds in the middle of a song live, that could be tricky.
Yeah, you'd have to bend down and twist knobs, which is a drawback for a really structured show.
Second, the delay times are locked into the physics of the original machine.
That's the price you pay for authenticity. The RE2 is modeling the finite tape loop length of the 201. You can't get infinitely long delays or super short, precise digital delays that were outside what the original 1974 machine could do. You're committing to that timing spectrum.
And third, the physical limitation of having just one foot switch.
It limits what you can do in real time compared to bigger units. You get tap tempo with a double press, which is great, but you can't, for instance, engage cap tempo and a hold or oscillation function at the same time. If you're a player who really uses effects as a live instrument, you have to be a bit strategic about it.
And finally, we have to mention the spring reverb one last time.
It's vintage gritty. It's short. It's metallic. If you want lush, pristine, modern hall ambience, you will need another reverb pedal. The spring reverb in the RE2 is a character piece. It's there to complement the tape engine and its specific sonic era. So when you look back at everything we've talked about in this deep dive, the main conclusion has to be the RE2's achievement in synthesis. They successfully took this entire chaotic, complex world of analog physics, the fixed multi-head logic, the nonlinear saturation, the wow and flutter, and they delivered it in a highly reliable, robust, and sonically authentic little box.
It's the ultimate shortcut to owning and using vintage sonic expertise.
It really is.
It's an incredible piece of engineering and a real testament to the timeless power of that classic sound. Balazzes didn't just make a digital delay, they reverse engineered a piece of history.
And, this leads us to the final thought, the provocation I want to leave you with. It's all about this fundamental tension between technological power and artistic constraint.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The original Roland RE201 was so successful precisely because of its physical limitations. The fixed head spacing, the maximum tape loop length, that inherent preamp color. These weren't features, they were just physics. There were constraints that forced musicians to be creative within a specific palette and that defined entire musical eras.
Right, they had to work within those guardrails.
Exactly. Now today, with DSP modeling, engineers can simulate anything. We could design a Space Echo with infinite head space however we want, with zero wow and flutter, a perfectly clean preamp.
The possibilities are endless.
They are. And yet the most successful and celebrated modern model, the RE2, dedicates its entire architecture to faithfully, painstakingly recreating the exact restrictions of the 1974 original.
So the question is, why?
Why do modern engineers and musicians still gravitate toward models that so perfectly replicate the limitations of the past? What does that tell us about the connection between creative constraint and musical identity? The fact that the RE2's success is based on how well it models the restrictions of the 201. It suggests that sometimes the boundaries of the past are actually the most fertile ground for defining the sound of the future.
A profound thought. Are we more creative when we're constrained? Something to think about the next time you dial in a little bit of wow and flutter.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the world of tape echo and modern modeling. We'll see you next time.